I think in the interest of time, I would like to ride on the protocols established already. But just to say that I'm pleased that the media could continue to, to support the cause, and I'm happy for the viewers as well. A few things that I would like to speak about, maybe two things only. But if you allow me, let me just say that as of today, a liter of petrol is 32 kwacha 70 ngwe. Before UPND came into power, it used to be 15 kwacha. So it has increased by 17 kwacha 70 ngwe. That is an increase of 118%. So UPND has increased the cost of the liter of petrol by 118 kwacha since they came into power. The third part is they promised to reduce that, but it has increased by over 100%. Diesel today is 30 kwacha 11 ngwe. It used to be 13 kwacha. That is an increase of 17 kwacha 11 ngwe. That increase is 131%. According to UPND, this needed to reduce. It was too high, but it has increased 131.6%. Fertilizer, my friends, is now around 1,200 kwacha per 50 kg bag. It used to be 600 kwacha. So it has increased by 600 kwacha. That is 100%. Now, the salaries and businesses for people have not increased by over 100% since UPND came into power. Just the last increase was 200 kwacha, if I'm not mistaken. So you are failing to increase the salaries and business opportunities for the people, but increasing what people need to survive. I think that's very unfortunate. Listening to Honorable Chisanga speaking a while ago, about these despotic laws that are being introduced, I get very concerned. I think for the Zambian people, if you are observing what is happening in your assembly, the budget is under approval. Today, as things stand, you can't even debate ahead. When the Minister of Energy brings the amount that you are approving for them, you can't debate. The minister won't even give them, a policy statement. The minister will just stand and say, I propose an amount of 400 million. And that is it. The amount goes. No debate. You can't question even how the Tazama pipeline has been utilized. You can't talk about why they have increased the petrol from 15 kwacha to 32 kwacha in 3 years. You can't. It just goes. The agriculture minister will come and say, I propose, give me 8 billion. And that's it. You can't ask if they have improved the systems such that they won't be able to refuse audits, such that the FISIP will not be misappropriated. No questions will be asked. So you have now a government which does not want to be questioned. The government which does not want to, to offer explanations to the people. I just wanted to begin on that score and maybe say my substantive submission today is I want to remind UPNG that we still have outstanding issues. That is my first point. We still have a lot of outstanding issues, and I will remind you just maybe about a few. Remember, you have ministers who are being investigated by SEC, and you have hidden their identity. You have concealed their identity. That is not transparency. That is not accountability. So that issue is still outstanding. We, the Zambian people, want to know which ministers are corrupt. which ministers are going for those investigations so that we can begin to treat them suspiciously. Secondly, we want to remind you that Ron Mwambwa is still sitting in the office of Auditor General illegally. We have told you that that guy is over age. According to the Constitution, when you are 60 years, you leave that office, you go home. That guy is over 60 years. He himself told the country that he was 63 years at the time, so he must even be 64 or 65 now. So let Ron Mwambwa go home. This is an outstanding issue. And you can't have Ron Mwambwa, who is an illegal Auditor General, having 2 deputies on acting for 3 years. What type of irresponsibility is this? Please remove Ron Mwambwa and make sure that his deputy positions are actually filled so that you make that office effective. Thirdly, I would like to tell you that the issue of those illegal audits which were contracted at Ministry of Finance have not closed. We still have a lot to do with those issues. We still want to hear how government is going to close those issues. And by the way, audit ends up in the assembly. There is no report that has come to the assembly from those illegal auditors. So we are still waiting for you, UPND government, to deal decisively and conclusively with that issue. I have to remind you that the issue of the illegal cancellation of hunting licenses has not been closed. And those, for me, are issues that I don't agree with you, and I will never agree with you until we close these issues. I have to tell you that the irresponsible export of maize in order to make the Zambian people suffer is something I'll never agree with you, and as far as I'm concerned, those are still active matters. If the irresponsible export of electricity, when there is no electricity in Zambia, people are suffering. The chair lady for women spoke earlier. She spoke about how expensive electricity has become. Now, you make electricity so expensive, but also unavailable. You export to other countries. Other countries even begin to boast that we are getting 80% of our deficit from Zambia. What an irresponsible government you are, UPND. You need to change. Those, for me, are issues that have not been closed. And the arresting of those civil servants, those people you arrested, saying they got allowances, some from Auditor General, others from Ministry of Finance. What are you doing now? Some of them, you've taken them back to Ministry of Finance, they are working. You have just failed to reinstate Dick's Chamber. You have failed to reinstate the directors and some directors and the PSS at the Ministry of Finance. You are a bad government, UPND. You are a very bad government. You select people, I don't know on what basis. This one must be punished, the other one should not be punished. You need to change. Those, for me, are not closed issues. You can't pack workers in a transition position for over 3 years. You pack more than 400 people in the holding position, you are paying them money, they are doing nothing. In their position, you have employed other people, and you are paying those people. So you are paying 2 people on one position. You are a reckless government. And then you continue saying, no, we are, you actually thrive on being prudent. What type of prudence is that? Paying 2 people in one position for 3 years. Irresponsible government. You need to quickly resolve those issues. So for me, those issues are actually open. I wanted to remind the UPND that we have plenty of issues, and I'll stop there. But the list is endless. I have to tell you that. The list is endless, and we'll continue reminding you, if you don't resolve these matters, there is no point at which, personally, I will agree with you. If you don't remove Ron Mwambwa, because for Ron Mwambwa there's no cure, he has to go. There's no cure. You can't reduce his age. You can't reduce Ron Mwambwa to a desirable age. He has to go. So I am sorry. So anyway, I just wanted to remind you, and maybe make a submission on my last concern. And my last concern is on the sale of Mopani. This for me is a big issue, the issue that you must not ignore as UPND government. You must not ignore this issue. The same way, I have to tell you, you should not ignore the transfer of the Lusaka Ndora Duo carriageway to private people. Because you are transferring that road. Okay? The same way you have transferred shares from Mopani to Delta. You are calling it a wholly 100% subsidiary of IRH. So on the 23rd of February 2024, shareholders of Mopani resolved that 51% of their shares should be sold to Delta. This is the announcement that was given by ZCCMIH on the 26th of February 2024. That on 23rd, that same month, the shareholders sat and unanimously approved the sale of 51% shares from Mopani to Delta, which is a subsidiary of IRH. Now, when we heard about the sale, two questions arose, because we were told by the previous Minister of Mines that Glencore, which used to own 90% of the shares, had left, and the 90% shares were taken by ZCCMIH, making ZCCMIH 100% owner of Mopani. Now, ZCCMIH is a company for the Zambian people. So clearly, the Zambians then owned Mopani 100%. So when we heard about the transfer or the sale of 51%, we asked some questions, because according to the Constitution, number one, you can't sell, you can't transfer, you can't dispose of a major government asset without the National Assembly having a vote on it. You can do that. So we began to ask questions. When did this issue come to the National Assembly? Question number one. Question number two, because the shareholders approved the sale of 51% shares, then we began to think, okay, when you sell shares, you receive money for those shares. So since these shares were our shares as the Zambian people, so as the Zambian people, we must have received some money. And we began to ask the Treasury, how much did you receive for the 51% shares? So that issue was brought on the floor of the House. Now, those two questions could not be answered by government through their minister. So the minister decided to change their established announcement. And when he came to the House, he came and told us that no, there was no sale of shares. Instead, there was an allotment of shares. Very unfortunate, I think questions followed, but the minister, in his usual style, could only, postpone on a number of us who are asking questions. Listen, the minister has changed now. It was not a sale, as was announced, as it is sitting now, or even on the ZCCMIH website. It is now an allotment. So we considered, again, what is an allotment? An allotment of shares is simply the utilization of those shares which are not yet used. So when you have a company, like my older brother, if you have a company, you and I have a company, that company at formation is going to be given what is known as authorized share capital. That is the maximum we can go in terms of issuing shares, isn't it? Yes. But within that authorized share capital, we can decide to use maybe just 25% or 50% or 75%. Then we leave a portion which is unused, isn't it? So if you and me own that company, you and me, my older brother, and then we have shares which are unused, whose shares are they? Are they not our shares?
They are shares. It's authorized share capital. We just didn't allot them.
It's authorized share capital, yes, which has didn't allot that capital to other shareholders or to ourselves.
That's right.
Isn't it? Mm-hmm. So when now we decide these shares now should be used, whose money should it be? Can you say this money is not for you because it's very interesting how my older brother Kabuswe is thinking these days. It's very...
He doesn't understand it.
So I want to tell my older brother, Minister Kabuswe, that those shares were sitting in the authorized share capital, and those shares belonged to Mopani, and Mopani belonged to ZCCMIH 100%, and ZCCMIH is a Zambian company, therefore the Zambian people owned those shares. So Zambians have a right to the money which you received for selling those shares. So stop saying it's an allotment, therefore there was no... You transferred control, you transferred shares to Delta. Right now the control of Mopani is sitting with Delta. It is irresponsible for you to say there was no transfer. It is irresponsible for you to say because there was no transfer, therefore there was no need for that issue to come to the assembly. Let me tell you, a share entitles a shareholder to the asset. So the fact that the shares have moved to Delta, that asset which is new, that smelter, that concentrator, that mine now belongs to another person. So you have transferred the major asset, sir. I was also very surprised when Honorable Kabuswe said the shares which are owned by ZCCMIH are more valuable than those owned than those allotted to Delta. What type of thinking is that? These are all ordinary shares carrying the same value. You come on the floor of the house, my brother, change. I know you are UPND, but change. You can't look. Not in the assembly. You can't do that. These things we're talking about. Some of outside of the assembly, but that is the assembly of people, where we must have the highest level of integrity. No, ayama shares yaliko bwino twabe pusha bakabuso bushe elo mwale eshitisha maine. What was the share price? Well, they jumped around, but kwa isa ka note from somewhere. Answer ya isa idishinga no $87.33 per share. When you go to the announcement which the CMI made, they even boasted that after this transaction, shares soared 11.9% from 42 kwacha per share to 47 kwacha per share. It is there. Number 8 kati ungolefu okube pobo para shupa para kosa. But awaba le mitumo okube pobo fi. Watata na leka ina but ichalo tisunge ni bwino chefye ni ko bufi mwachiramo na totera sana.
What I want to make clear here is that we do not dispute the decisions of the speaker even when we don't like them. As I speak to you, one of our hardworking members of parliament from Ambilima is serving suspension. In as much as we don't like that suspension, the speaker has got powers to exercise within the confines of the Powers and Privileges Act and the standing orders to discipline members of parliament, all of us. But what matters is the procedure that is used, because for any action that is taken against the member, we have got provisions both in the act and in the standing orders. So our contestation was that the speaker should stick to the rules, should stick to the standing orders. We should not start creating situations which are not provided for, such as the ultimatum she was giving as to when the member should be available. All those are catered for. But what is of interest is that in the aftermath of that ruling, we also heard some statements coming from the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs and Internal Security. After that, the Inspector General of Police has also issued a statement. My concern is the manner these statements are coming out. Today, we have been treated to headlines such as the Zimbabwean authorities saying JJ is not in our custody. Honorable JJ Banda is not in their custody. Now, this is where Zambians are asking questions. And for me, I cannot describe the manner in which statements have come out as organized confusion and to some extent indiscipline. And if the minister discovers that has been misled, it will be important that he magnanimously deal with those that could have misled him, because the minister depends on the support systems in the ministry. So to see Inspector General of Police also issuing a statement when he should have had an input in the statement that the minister issued points to indiscipline of the highest order. And I call the minister to ensure that he puts his house in order, so that he should be the one accountable for the statements that are coming from the ministry. He made a statement to the press, and he also further came to the floor of the House and made assurances on the floor of the House. And so we are comforted that that ruling from the Speaker will probably an academic exercise, because now the state have assured the nation that they will make Honorable JJ Banda available through the extradition processes. Now, Zimbabwe is just next door. Zimbabwe is just next door. And here I've seen one media institution that has got presence in Zimbabwe. You should be able to get information on whether, indeed, as we speak now, Honorable JJ Banda is in the cells of the police of Zimbabwe. So that the ruling of Madam Speaker becomes an academic academic exercise. We're also trying to be helpful to our Speaker, so that we lessen this thing of all the decisions that she makes should be subjected for interpretation in the courts of law. We felt it was a privilege to have her coming from the legal fraternity to be helpful in making sure that the decisions she makes are not subjected to the interpretation of the courts. Because if we can count the number of decisions that have been made, which have gone to the courts of law and she has been found wanting, they exceed 5, 6. And it's not desirable for the institution that has got the mandate to offer oversight functions. We shouldn't be the only arm of government which would be found wanting all the time. So I had one academician speaking and advising us that we allow the process of the people of Petauke to have their representative back. Yes, sir. What we are just saying is that let's follow the procedures that are set out. I did say all of us have served suspensions. We have not contested those suspensions because we know that the Speaker has got powers conferred on her by the powers and privileges. But those powers must not be abused. And so we were trying to be helpful in saying, Madam Speaker, here, we feel that you have not followed our rules. So I thought I could make that clear. And if indeed Honorable JJ Banda is found wanting, he should be subjected to the punishment through the rules without creating other rules that do not exist. But we shall be waiting with keen interest to see how this drama plays out. The minister makes a statement, and the Inspector General of Police also goes and makes a statement on the same subject matter. How? So the minister at his level should be interacting with his colleagues in the region. I've been in that office and I know how we get information from within the region. It would have just been a phone call to his counterpart in Harare. And even as he was coming, he should have had all this information verified by his counterparts on the other side. Because the danger of giving information which is not accurate related to another country has got implications, diplomatic implications. Because neighboring countries have got platforms where we share matters of politics, defense, and security. Joint permanent commissions with laid down communication procedures. So, my prayer is that what the minister informed the nation is accurate. If it's not accurate, he must make sure that those who could have misled him, their heads roll. Because he might be the same one to be facing the brunt. The next matter is the matter which was on the floor today regarding a proposed bill on the mobile money transfer levy, which the Minister of Finance has proposed. It came last year in 2023. Even when we didn't support it, we told them that they were sending the bill to a wrong institution, Bank of Zambia. They didn't listen as usual. And that's what I was reminding them. Now, we cannot be making laws that will be visiting every other year. The only bills that we deal with continuously are money bills. Because every fiscal year comes with its own money bills. Now, they are proposing this bill to now be under the Commissioner General, Zambia Revenue Authority. You see, these platforms that have been created by mobile utility companies, mobile phone utility companies, have helped the unbanked population. They have helped the far-flung areas. I imagine the distances that our people cover in Shwangandu to move from certain areas to the banks. It has been a challenge. But now, you can send a 200 kwacha, you can send a 1,000 kwacha for my widow mother to buy fertilizer through the mobile money. And I'm sure the mobile companies have had a way of ensuring that they pay necessary tax. Now, this bill is seeking, among other things, under the objectives, to provide for keeping of records of operations. All of you, dear colleagues from the media, you have seen how your fellow youths stand from morning to the evening, standing and running after customers. Those young men and women are the ones this bill is targeting. And if you discuss with those young men and women, first of all in the urban areas, they will tell you that maybe at the end of
it's unthinkable, and we are told that our civil servants have had an increment of 500 kwacha, 200 kwacha. How do you survive under such pathetic conditions? You cannot survive. Fine, they are saying we are load shedding. Now power has come. We are getting power. We've had power for the last 5 days, but it's as good as we've had no power. Because where are we going to get 500 kwacha almost in every other 3-4 hours you purchase? I'm appealing to this government and I'm appealing to the Zambian people. These are the things that we talked about in the campaigns. We have to be realistic, even in terms of increment. Minister of Energy, this is uncalled for. You are taking us back to ancient times. You know that even as much as we have solar, as much as we have gensets, we cannot power our geysers. We cannot cook on our stoves. Are you telling us that even now the excuse that government will give us is that we are providing electricity in the homes? You are not providing electricity in the homes because where are we going to get the money? almost every other 3 days you have to purchase units for 3,000 kwacha, when our pay has just been stagnant. Cost of living but salary is stagnant. It is very unfair, very inhuman, it's unthinkable. I've never ever imagined that this country will get to where we are today. Last time I talked about human dignity. When we are talking about human dignity, some of these things actually lie in human dignity. When you deprive your own citizens of actually electricity is a necessity. It's not a privilege, it's a necessity. Looking at the times that we're living in, life has become so hard. For sure, for you, and where are we even going to start cooking? Because the malasha has been banned. So it's like every other corner where Zambians would want to breathe, we are being squeezed. Where are you even getting this mathematics? The more you buy units, the less that you are given. I bought units for 97 units last week. The more I buy for 500, the number is coming down. What kind of mathematics and what kind of torture is this? Surely, where are we even going to get the money? It's time that the Zambian people, we have to arise, colleagues. There's enough of this government. We cannot go on living like this. We have the cash for work. Cash for work, duplication of labor. We have, for example, in my constituency, you have cash for work. You are having vulnerable mothers go in those drainages and dig those drainages. Where are the council workers who are being paid? Where are the council workers who are being... People are getting free money. Our workers are getting... And some of the roads, mind you, some of these drainages are on contract. Then you again go and give vulnerable people, because you know they have no say, they have nothing to do. You are going to go and say cash for work. Human dignity, again, is very, very, very important. Today we are seeing the code track. In almost every district, thousands of people are running to see the code track. And government is cheering. They are seeing it for the first time. We should be worried as a country. We should be worried as a nation. That is unaccounted for labor. It's just showing that a lot of people are unemployed, a lot of people are hungry, because if you are employed and people have work to do, who's going to line up in the road and go and watch a coal truck? This should call for worry for government. It should really call for worry for government that this is how much the vulnerability levels have actually skyrocketed in this country, where every district you have thousands of people lining up during the day when people are supposed to be productive. Shame on this government. It is really, really, really sad, and I call upon every mother, every woman out there, we must arise and begin to talk about issues that are affecting the welfare, the well-being of our own people. We have a sad nation at the moment. Everyone you meet is sad. Everyone you meet is troubled. Everyone you meet is hungry. No one has ever, you meet in the streets or even in your home, will say, I'm comfortable, I'm happy. And today we have government praising. It's either somebody is complaining, or they are sick, they are vulnerable, or whatever. It is a very sad nation. And I want to call up the Christians in this nation. It's time that we got on our knees. We need to pray for this nation. We are under a serious attack. We are under a serious demon that is hovering around this nation. And if we're not careful, the 10 years that we're talking about going back will be 100 years of disintegrating into a society that is so vulnerable that we will not even know each other's names. So for me, my appeal is to the Minister of Mines, Minister of Energy. I'm calling the Minister of Mines because he has so many issues. I'm coming from a province where a lot of issues pertaining Mopani. I'll allow my colleagues to talk on that. But really, Minister of Energy, President Hakainde Hichilema, you need to do something. Really, Zambians, this is uncalled for. We cannot be cheering when we're buying units for 500 kwacha. They give you 60 units. How are we going to survive? How are we going to pay our children's school fees? How are we going to take our children to the hospital? How are we going to pay our children's meals? It is uncalled for, unfounded, and I call upon every other Zambian to make a protest. We must begin to protest. This is uncalled for. Where is the money going that the money is being borrowed? You know? So really, for me, this is what I just had. I needed to really speak on the issue of ZESCO. Minister of Energy, you need to do something, or otherwise we are on your tag.
In the reports, just in the past 3 years, it's evident that clearly a contractor carrying out major works like the ones under the dual carriageway without a consultant. We're asking questions, Comrade Milupi. Who is the wrong government in power? A government that is here to loot. Acknowledging the honorable members that spoke earlier. Of course, not forgetting the Fourth Estate, the media, that have been our partner on this journey. I wish to recognize you and thank you most sincerely for the work that you've done so far. Icha Kubadilapo, like Honorable Kampiongo pointed out, we have gone to Kawambwa to participate in that election, even when we know that it's a product of a flawed electoral system. It's basically an illegal election. We had no choice because we knew that the UPND, their intention was to frustrate us to a point where we don't participate in all these elections. Senior Counsel George Sanga pointed out there was a stay that we got from the Chinsali High Court stopping that particular election. And ECZ decided to proceed and hold the election, the mayoral elections, even with that stay. The excuse that they gave was that there was a ruling in the Concord on the 15th of October that allowed them to proceed with the election even when there was a stay. But I want to remind ECZ that in that same ruling, there was emphasis on the 90-day period. The judges in the Concord say that elections cannot be held beyond 90 days from the time the seat is declared vacant. I want the Zambian people to know that Honorable Chilangwa's seat, which is the Kawambwa seat, was declared vacant on the 24th of July, 2024. If you count from that time, we are about 120 days. I would like the Zambian people to appreciate and see the hypocrisy of the ECZ. The ECZ is saying because the timeline provided for in the Constitution is 90 days. That's why the Concord has said even when there is a stay, you proceed because you cannot enlarge this time. From the same judgment, they've picked the part that talks about the stay and they've ignored the part that talks about the 90 days. I thought that was important. As I talk about Kawambwa, we have gone there out of principle. We still know that that election is being held outside the 90 days that the Concord talked about. Ndefo kutasha mwe bantu bonse mwebo tulinabo mutonse alliance umbrella. For a very long time, my UPND balisa kwata freedom. Here kuti vale wafebeka mwa election so they could do whatever they wanted. Twalikwete ba MP abalea kuma election na matumba fulu na basendenda makuma fio tanka yaba youth to go and spend in those elections. Takwali baku bakopa na nguku bamona. They would literally go and overrun whoever is there and compete against themselves and emerge victorious. So apanomba batonse mwebe na Zambia bonse ngefe twala ndile membership ya tonse yali wa very wide. Bali aba farmer ebo bala ile ukuti fertilizer kwa pa 250. Those are members of tonse. Mweba tonse member ba farmer mwa wali muka wambwa, please let's go and vote on the 20th of December. Mwe misepela mwe wapeli amatanka wa mipoka indalama bambokula fola ba minister wa UPND and they are using the same money ukulali pema by elections, turn up in numbers and vote for the candidate the Tonse Alliance Stan Mwansa. Ba Tonse mwewa ambokula shitama light number 500 kwacha 60 units. You are members of Tonse. Turn up in numbers on 20th of December. Umwina Zambia onso ule chula alasanga omutende muli tonse pantu amapate ali muli tonse including the PF bali bombele fintu ifyaletanga tabalanda kunuma ifyalangira pa butatutu ukuti ipate nipate itanga tabalanda nipate aishiwo kuti amaka yaba ku bantu so imwe batonse mwe bantu bonsi mwe balechula mwe balechuchutika mwe misepela mwe balefumye nchito chilabushikumulandu ndo amashina mkwete. You are all members of tonse ba civil servant mwe bale nukula machito umulandu fe weshinafye noko wafyalilwe ya members of tonse tangileni muye kuka wambwa pa 20th those that are from Kawambwa pakuti mwinga votela candidate wesu uyoni Danstan Mwansa. I thought this was very important to acknowledge that now we have decided to participate in every election so that we can give the right competition to the UPND. And just as a reminder, wewe na Zambia, if you saw the recent elections, mumonyama results for elefuma. If you get the totals for the opposition, mushte compare neo ba UPND bale kwata, the opposition ile kwata more. Badiana vaya. Yeah. Whether they like it or not, now via numbers do not lie. I want you to go back to the recent elections. Mule ya manama numbers wa kuetewa opposition, add them together compared to what the UPND is getting. So it's very clear that the Zambians have made a decision. Zambians have decided that UPND has to go. So with that, I will also just add to the list my young brother was giving a catalog of things that have been left unattended to. Abantu bale tumama phone bale tinomba fimwe finto fumwa imishe kunuma na nomba ta filapwa yo nili ilali fika pwa. Honorable Kafwaya highlighted some of those. I want to also say that the FIC reports in the coming weeks we will zero in and look at FIC reports. You remember that there's a report that talked about the $2.8 billion worth of suspicious transactions. We want to zero in and discuss this and find out how far government has gone. There's a report that talked about suspicious transactions amounting to 5.8 billion kwacha. Another one talked about suspicious transactions amounting to 13.5 billion kwacha. And the other one talked about suspicious transactions amounting to 64 billion kwacha. Now, remember that all these suspicious transactions have happened in the past 3 years that the UPND has been in power. This is the UPND, the same UPND government, when they were in opposition. The last report under the PF, I think there were suspicious transactions amounting to 2 billion kwacha. They went to town, including President Hakainde Hichilema. They called us thieves, they called us criminals, because the FIC report reported suspicious transactions worth 2 billion kwacha. Now, if you look at the amounts that I've highlighted in the reports just in the past 3 years, it's evident that clearly we have a wrong government in power, a government that is here to loot national resources. Because clearly, $2.8 billion worth of suspicious transactions, and government is quiet. If government could get excited over 15 houses in Ibexil and one house belonging to a former minister, a few buildings here and there, a farm somewhere in the village, if they could get excited with those. The question that I keep asking, why is government not excited over these transactions, like $2.8 billion, 5.8 billion kwacha, 13.5 billion kwacha, and 64 billion kwacha? Why isn't government not excited? The DPP and everybody else, why are they not excited? Could this be the reason why we still do not have a board at SCC? Is this the reason why we don't have a substantive the DG at SCC? Could this be the reason? Because clearly, if there was so much excitement over 2 billion kwacha and a few buildings, there should have been more excitement in these figures that have been reported by the FIC under the charge of President Hakainde Hichilema. I also want to remind the Zambian people, in addition to the list that Mr. Honorable Kafoya has, we will pursue the corruption at Ministry of Health, especially the transaction that involved $100 million. We know that SCC is sitting with letters that were authored by ministers to contractors in that particular transaction. We want to follow up on those matters. We also want to follow up on the matters that under Ministry of Agriculture that involve the purchase of fertilizers. This is where fertilizers worth $30 million were purchased for over $50 million, within the country. We also want to follow up, to make a follow-up on the concessions that were given to mining houses. You remember we have said that corruption will not only involve the giving or receiving of bribes, but it looks at putting private interest over and above public interest. And this may come in form of legislation, policy, and administration. So we have question marks on the concessions that Honorable Msokotwane gave to the mining houses. So want to enlarge the conversation around this, especially that 3 years down the line, we haven't seen the real commitment to these mining houses ramping up production to 3 million tons as earlier reported. If anything, we have seen that the production by these mining houses has actually gone down. We also want to pursue the corruption in the energy sector. You remember that there were a number of allegations that arose, ranging from letters authored by ministers in the procurement of fuel, things to do with the usage of the pipeline and Indeni. So these are matters that we'll be pursuing in addition to the ones Honorable Kafoya pointed out, because the Zambian people have taken us back to say we can't leave these matters unattended to. And remember, all these matters that we're highlighting have happened in the last 3 years that the government, UPND government has been in power. We all detest corruption, and there will never be a time that will support corruption. But I want to take you back and just make a simple comparison. You remember that in the 10 years that the PF was in power, there were 3 major things that were raised, or major cases that were referred to as corruption, that end us all those names: thieves, Wakawalala, Masholi, and so on. It was 1, the fire tenders; 2, the ambulances at Ministry of Health. What was the third one?
48 houses.
The 48 houses. If you go back, go to the answer, you check that these were the 3 things they consistently pointed out in that 10-year period. Now look at what has happened under the UPND in just 3 years. So if you wanted to know what a corrupt government looks like, ask
Who is Mashodi?
who's Masholi, who are criminals, ask us here in front. We may just give you an idea of who these people may be. So all these things that we're talking about have happened just in the past 3 years. So we also want to talk about the corruption that is happening in the procurement of feeder roads and the individuals involved in that. Aren't you surprised that suddenly there is total silence? The individuals that came on the floor of the House and were accusing members on the left about giving themselves expensive contracts, feeder roads, are suddenly quiet. So we're wondering what is going on. There are a number of feeder roads contracts that have been signed by Ministry of Local Government. Or maybe, Honorable, could it be in line with that saying that you don't talk with food in your mouth?
Yeah.
Maybe, because they're not talking. You can't hear these members talking. Yeah. So we want to come and look at one of the issues that arose was that road contracts under the PF were contracted expensively. We want to find out now, because I remember, my memory serves me right, roads under the PF were between 800,000 to 1 million kwacha per kilometer. We know that there are roads under the UPND now, feeder roads, that are going up to 2.5 million kwacha per kilometer. And the people that were coming on the floor accusing the PF to have been awarding themselves expensive road contracts are totally quiet now. So we are going to, in the coming weeks, we will tackle these topics. And of course, we want to speak on behalf of the youths. I'm sure that you have seen on social media, the youths are very worried that the tankers that were allocated to them a few years back were repossessed by Ministry of Youth and Sport, and some of those tankers are spotted, where even where they wrote the names of cooperatives, they've actually painted those sections, and these tankers are moving every day. We are yet to find out who's benefiting. But we know the individuals that are getting money from these fuel tankers are in government. These are individuals that are appearing at every by-elections with cargo pants money coming from fuel tankers. And you know, they've even given them names because you know, they're doing this with the blessing of their boss. Their boss is aware that the youths are crying every day. They were recently called for a meeting, but up to now they are waiting for this money. So we're going to expose the corruption, you know, around fuel tankers and that. Meanwhile, we'll also talk about Comrade Milupi. I think Honorable Kampiongo did a good job. Comrade Milupi, as you know, is the only non-member of ADD. He is the only non-member of ADD, but he's also Minister of Infrastructure. Yeah, so sometimes the positions that he takes, you know, of grave concern, really. He's my big brother, but I think he needs to tone down, even when he wants to attack the priests. So I want to redirect his energy. Comrade Milupi, are you aware that there is no consultant to supervise the works on the dual carriageway? Comrade Milupi, instead of you insulting the priests, go to the dual carriageway and go and find out that the contractors are working without a consultant. We know very well that, you know, under our laws and policies, not have a contractor carrying out major works like the ones under the dual carriageway without a consultant. We're asking questions, Comrade Milupi. Who is certifying the works on the dual carriageway? Who is certifying the quality of materials that are being employed? I'm not in any way questioning the capacity of the two contractors. I know the two contractors that are there. But it's a settled practice. There must be a consultant to certify the materials, the quality of the materials, and indeed the works that are being done. Who is ensuring that the contractors are adhering to the proposed designs? Remember that the price of that contract is directly related to the design. And the design will dictate what materials, in what quantities will be used. So, Comrade Milupi, we'll be following up this matter, but in the meantime, leave the men of God alone, go to the dual carriageway, and tell the Zambian people why, to this end, there's been no consultant supervising the works on the Ndola dual carriageway. And we know, Comrade Milupi, that you have the full knowledge of this particular position. The question is, why have you kept quiet? Why has Comrade Milupi decided to be talking about the priests and not talk about the job that has been given? He superintends over infrastructure works, he abandons and leaves major works to be carried out without consultants and decides to go and, you know, postcon on our priests. So Comrade Charles Milupi, go to the Ndola dual carriageway and come and tell the Zambian people why there's no consultant. EIZ, we're also calling upon you. EIZ, you all the Zambian people, an explanation. Why are you not making a statement on why there's no consultant on that particular road. We know that you have moved in swiftly to stop local contractors from proceeding with works for as long as there's no consultant on site. If there's no resident engineer, the works cannot proceed. Why have you left that major project to proceed without a consultant? So these are some of the issues that we have with colleagues like, Honorable Milupi, who have decided to go and speak against the priests when the job that they've been given.
Job description.
The job description.
Kills out areas.
The key result areas are actually on that particular road and not where he's been putting his energy. Countrymen and women, you are aware that when President Hakainde Hichilema declared that drought a national disaster, Honorable Kafuaya, Member of Parliament for Lunte, asked very difficult questions. Firstly, his contention was that the declaration was premature because there was no data, there were no statistics, there was no information upon which to base that declaration. Yes, if we have a disaster, how much help do we need? How much money do we need to go through this disaster? So, however, later they came back and gave some statistics. We were later told that the government was importing 650,000 metric tons from Tanzania. I want the Zambian people to know that to date, only 18,000 metric tons have come. We want the Minister of Agriculture to come clean before the Zambian people and tell us why only 18,000 metric tons have arrived. There were a lot of gymnastics and machinations earlier. They told us about one mining house that was going to transport the maize, one PS saying it was going to be free of charge, the minister saying there was a cost attached to it. From that point, as your representatives, we knew there was going to be something wrong. So, to date, this maize has not arrived. We want to find out why hasn't this maize arrived. Because for all we care, very soon we'll start harvesting fresh maize. That maize will go in the shades, it will go on the market. And there will be no one to tell us a story about the 650 metric tons. So, we want to call upon Minister of Agriculture to tell the Zambian people why there's only 18 metric tons that have come. It's very important because most of the donors that donated towards this genuine cause, the money they were donating is coming from the taxpayers. So we have to take responsibility and ensure that even the money that were given by donors is properly utilized. Remember, we have said corruption will come by way of legislation, administration, and policy. We are smelling a rat already in that procurement of maize from Tanzania and the movement of the maize into the country. So next week, we will come with more details on this transaction. But we've given a pre-alert and an opportunity to the minister to be able to say something before we address the nation on what is happening regarding that maize. The other sector of concern really is the health sector. You know that it's not very long ago that we had the procurement of medicines from Egypt, the 61 containers and so on. Now, if you look at what the government is trying to do, they are trying to amend the ZAMSA Act. The amendment is for purposes of legislating corruption. They want to legislate corruption through the amendment of the ZAMSA Act. Basically, some of the proposals, they want to remove power from the board, okay, and posit it in the minister. The minister should be able to act as an individual to procure drugs, for instance, in what they are calling emergency procurement. We want to call upon cooperating partners to look seriously into this before these amendments are enacted into law. I particularly would want to call upon the U.S. Embassy, because the U.S. are our major funders in the health sector, they need to take specific interest to the proposed amendments to the ZAMSA Act. You can imagine that the PF under President Edgar Chagwa Lungu saw the need to create or to put most of the functions under ZAMSA, because from medical stores into ZAMSA, some of the functions to do with procurement of drugs and others were moved to ZAMSA for one reason, so as to depoliticize the procurement of drugs. That the minister and other people have many other things to look at, specifically on procurement, storage and distribution of drugs. We put that under ZAMSA because experts in those fields will actually sit at ZAMSA. The UPND government wants to reverse that. They want those powers to go back to the minister, where the minister should be able to make emergency procurement of drugs and make key decisions, direct or give what you may term as non-specific directives to the board, so that the raison d'etre, the reason to be for setting up ZAMSA, are defeated by putting powers under the minister. We want to go against these proposals. And like I said, I want to call upon our cooperating partners, and specifically, I'm singling out the US to take specific interest. You may be interested to know that from the time the US government started supporting the health sector, they've spent over $15 billion on this country. And we want to be able to go back to them to say, can you please look at this? Because if you look at what happened, the drugs in the 61 containers were actually procured by a minister through some flawed procurement process. So what they want to do through the new act, they actually want to amend the act that will allow what happened in Egypt to be a normal procurement process, where a minister can take off with a briefcase and land in Egypt and call a few friends to the hotel and deliver cash to them, and then 61 containers come, and then nobody knows where they are, and they are later found at a garage. They want that to be legislated in the act. So Philadelphia achitike pama container la 61, where the minister by lesenden dalama, okay, outside the normal procurement system, no kuya na shoku Egypt. Shiria ifila watu wale pitafi ukabwata kwa pharmacy wako ukukwaliva baleta abantu bane nasa mfu ama drugs. We are sabala ninkwata kwa box 4 ninkwata ko, and then they procure into 61 containers, totally outside the normal procurement system. So those containers came because they did not follow the system. Nobody even knew where they were. And because the minister and the staff were dealing with the suppliers of these drugs, the people that consigned those drugs and the attendant costs were not attended to. No, there was no money for clearing of containers and so on, because it was outside the normal process. That's how those containers were found at a garage. Now, what they are trying to do, the UPND government want to legislate to make what happened to the 61 containers normal. We want to say no. Can we leave ZAMSA to operate freely under the act? Because when we are talking about drugs, we're not talking about things like maize or groundnuts. You can't trade with drugs like normal or ordinary commodities. You need experts. Expertise is required, and the expertise may not reside in the minister's office, as it were. So we can't leave out the experts at ZAMSA and take that power to the minister's office. So we want people to take a lot of interest. Like I said, corruption may come by way of legislation, may come by way of policy and administration. So what we are seeing, the attempts to amend the ZAMSA Act is pure corruption. They want to legislate corruption because the minister, they propose to give the minister so much power that he can even give certain non-specific directives to the board. Basically, he becomes ZAMSA and everything that he says goes. He can pick up $10 million and go to Egypt to buy containers. He's the one that knows the price. He's a tender committee, he's everything. So that is pure corruption. the cooperating partners, please take interest in this matter. We are very worried, and we will keep an eye. And of course, this is one of the things that we thought that we needed to talk about, so that we can stop them in their tracks before they go very far. And just received, this is some very sad news. The acting registrar of societies has resigned, citing reasons of receiving illegal instructions. So the UPND will not stop at anything when it comes to illegalities. This is just received now. I want to repeat, I've received some sad news. The acting registrar of societies has resigned. Anaka, because they're receiving, and we may not be wrong to suspect that they may have been given wrong instructions so that they affect the Tonse nomination. Yeah. So again, I think as a country, we are on a very dangerous path. I also want to call upon other cooperating partners. I'm aware that the American government, under President Donald Trump, is taking initiatives, to warn certain African countries on the mistreatment of their opposition leaders. I want to make a call that should be extended to this country, because look at how many opposition political leaders are in prison today, jailed on flimsy grounds, trumped up charges. How many are taken to the courts? It's unprecedented, has never happened before. I'm appealing to the American government that they must extend their eye to see what is happening in this country, how the democratic space is shrinking every day, how the freedom of speech is no longer guaranteed, and to the extent that this government would like to amend Section 70 of the Penal Code in order to punish the opposition. So one of the reasons, like Councillor Chisanga said, this amendment of Section 70 is meant for the opposition. We have over 500 people at Cabinet Office in holding positions. So President Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND do not want us to ask the reasons why those 70. Because if you take interest and look at the 500 names that are at Cabinet Office, there's a golden thread. There's a pattern that you're going to establish. So when you establish that pattern and ask why it is like that, you should go in for 20 years.
This is restructured.
I want to repeat that. If you ask what is happening at Cabinet Office and the names that have been put on suspension, the moment you ask and say, look, Article 259 is very instructive, that those that have been charged with the responsibility to make appointments must do so, taking into account regional diversity, gender, among others. You'll be speaking within the law. But the fact that you mention names to say Kafwaya, Chisanga, Fube, why is it that these are the only names that are repeating themselves? You will be taken in for 20 years. That's what President Hakainde Hichilema is trying to achieve, to ensure that we can no longer speak to the ills that the UPND government is perpetrating. So we want the US government to not